Good morning, good morning. Thank you so much for joining me. This is the podcast, The Endurance of Labor Laws. I am your lovely host, Lesley Sullivan, and today is episode 96, and we are going to take a look at the Superfund Sites in the lovely state of Kentucky. But first of all, let me give a big shout out to my listeners because as usual, it's always good to see you guys. So here we go. A big shout out to Virginia, Oklahoma, Texas, my lovely neighbor, New York, Florida, British Columbia, Massachusetts, Alabama, Louisiana, and Oregon. Good to see you, Oregon. And then in terms of countries, the United States, the Russian Federation, Canada, and the United Kingdom. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started on this puppy here. It's not a huge list, and since it is not huge, I will go ahead and list the current Superfund sites in the state of Kentucky, as well as the ones that they have already cleaned up, meaning they're cleaned up and good to go, they're no longer an issue. But the ones I'm going to list first are the ones that are still active. The ones that are still active and are still a problem, I don't have a lot of information on them. It kind of surprised me on this. So I know the names, the counties, but I don't have the dates of when they were listed as a Superfund site. And I don't have the information that says what exactly is the problem or what exactly caused the problem. So this podcast might be a little shorter than others just because there's not much information that I can provide except for the limited information that I do have. But I do think it is important to go ahead and list them because, Kentucky is not the worst state. I'll say that. It's not as bad as New Jersey or California or some of the other states that are up in the Northeast. What's interesting is that the Northeast is where a lot of these Superfund sites that are on the national priorities list are located. I don't know why there are so many toxic sites up in the Northeast. I don't understand that. What's interesting is that the northeastern part of the United States tends to be very liberal. So I'm kind of surprised that the upper northeast part of the United States has the majority of the Superfund sites, at least that are listed on the national priorities list. But yet it's predominantly liberal or Democrat. They tend to have very high taxation, and they tend to be very overly pro-environmentalism. Like it's not just, hey, I care, I want to help. It's, we're going to tax you, we're going to punish you kind of thing. I just find that very interesting that it's like they overregulate and it's like their stuff's not getting cleaned up. So, hence, in terms of Kentucky, they're actually doing really good. In terms of, like, if you look at the stats and the data analysis, they do not have very many Superfund sites compared to the upper northeast of the United States. So that's good for Kentucky there. And also Kentucky, I don't know a whole lot about Kentucky. I need to research it, but I do know that they tend to be very pro-America. And they're usually not for high taxation. They're usually not for a radical government. So that might be why their state does not have very many Superfund sites. And that might be why it's more reasonable and more realistic to live there and to do business in Kentucky because they don't overtax people and they don't overpunish people. If someone makes a mistake, especially in regards to environmentalism, and they cause a problem, by all means, give them a fine. But it needs to be reasonable for what has occurred. So that's kind of one of those things that I've noticed that in regards to the EPA and really just extreme liberals, they notice an issue, but then they overpunish the person, so much so that the person, they give up hope in terms of trying to fix their problem or correct it. And then also the government also depletes people of their financial resources. And these are people that own businesses. So it's kind of like, okay, we understand something happened, but give us a chance to correct the issue. It's almost like, if someone offends you and you never give them a chance to apologize. You just shame and blame, shame and blame, shame and blame. Well, shaming and blaming does not help in any situation. Does that mean you don't hold someone accountable? Not by any means. You still hold someone accountable, but if you never give a person the chance to do the right thing, to apologize, and to make up for what they did, especially in regards to environmentalism, then it's kind of like, I understand why we have so many Superfund sites, because if a company, first of all, isn't sure what to do, and then they're being overly punished by the EPA, or even just local states, local government, Because what we've seen in times past is that sometimes the rules, laws, and legislations and regulations are way more stricter in particular states, and they're worse than what the federal government imposes on people. So that's another reason why people are just like, we don't know what to do. And that's really sad, because they should know what to do. And even if they don't know what to do, they should still have that opportunity to get the help that they need, so that way they don't make that same environmental mistake again, and that we can all learn from it. Because I look at it this way. When someone makes a mistake, it's probably not the first time that type of mistake has been made. But we can always learn from it, and we can always say, hey, this is what happened back in 1962 or something. We know not to use this chemical in this manner anymore, and now we know how to properly dispose of it. And now we know how it affects the environment. And if anything, now that we know that, if ever we have another chemical spill, I'm just making this up, but if ever we have another chemical spill that resembles what happened, for example, in 1962, then we know, because this newer chemical is in the same family of that previous chemical, we know what it reacts to, and we know how to deactivate it, and we know how to strip it out of the environment, so that way it's no longer affecting the environment, and the environment is going back to what it was before this chemical spilled. I'm just making all that up in terms of like giving an analogy, an example, but I think that's what we should do. If we notice an issue, it's normal to react. I understand that, but it's way worse to overreact, like hyperventilate. And, I think what's going on right now in terms of our government, especially at the federal level, I just wonder, what kind of rules, laws, and regulations are they wanting to pass? Because there are quite a few liberals within the Democratic Party right now, and that really concerns me. I mean, by all means, they have every right to vote. They have every right to speak up about things. Those things are great, because those are rights that all of us have, regardless of what party we're in. I just get concerned, excuse me, I have the hiccups a little bit. I just get concerned whenever they want to overregulate. And instead of helping people, they just point out the problems all the time. And it's like they never want the problems to go away. They just want it to continue to be an issue, so that way they still have a job, and so they can raise taxes. And then make it seem like, oh, people are so stupid, we need a nanny state. Well, we know that nanny states don't work, and people are not stupid. So that's just one of those things I wanted to point out, because, even though we do have quite a few Superfund sites on this list, there's like 13 to 1,400 of them in terms of across the United States. This is just the national priorities list. Again, if you're new to this podcast, we actually have about 40,000 Superfund sites littered across the United States. But the ones that we are going over in this particular podcast, in these episodes, when we're talking about Superfund sites listed in each individual state, we're talking about Superfund sites that are considered so toxic, so hazardous, that they got bumped up to a national priority list, and they were added to that list for a reason. So that's why I get concerned whenever I see that there are Superfund sites that are still on this list, but yet these Superfund sites were added to this list back in the 80s, which is when the Superfund law or act was created, and they created this list to try and implement cleanup, meaning that all of these Superfund sites, most of them were already there way before the 80s. Some of them go back to the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. And the reason why they go back so far is that before the EPA was created, you had all these different federal agencies that were not talking to each other. And they were each trying to do their own thing, kind of have their own implementation of how to handle these different areas. And, that can be a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because you have agencies that they want to help, and they're being, they're acknowledging that there's an issue. But it also kind of turned into a competition, kind of like a turf battle, almost like what we've seen in these labor unions. And then when there's a turf battle, it's like nothing gets done, which is what was happening. I do think some things are being done, but not a lot. And so the public really spoke out, especially in the 60s, about these toxic sites that are being, that are very hazardous to neighborhoods, to people. So it really got the attention of our federal government, because there were already things happening at a state level. And so what President Richard Nixon did was he brought about the EPA. He created the EPA. And he made it a federal agency that specifically handles environmental issues. Because prior to the EPA, if we go back to what we discussed previously, prior to the EPA, let's say, for example, a Superfund site or a toxic site is identified. Prior to the EPA being created, that agency, the way that the issue got divided up would be, what is it affecting? So if you have a federal agency that focuses on agriculture, then that Superfund site or that hazardous site would be identified and be given as a responsibility to the agriculture department. Let's say there's a toxic hazardous site that affects the ocean. Well, prior to the EPA, if there was a toxic hazardous site that was identified as contaminating the ocean, it would go to the federal agency that handled oceans or waters or canals or rivers. So, but it just wasn't getting done, and things were not being completed in a timely manner. And also, I'm not really sure if they knew what to do, just because they had never handled this before. So just remember that just because our federal agencies way back in the day, and even today, but way back in the day, just because they did not know necessarily how to handle these doesn't mean they were stupid or incompetent, although I'm sure there were some not bright people working there, because if they're having, territorial battles, tiff battles about territory, then, obviously that's not very smart and educated to do that. But what I'm saying is that, when something is new for someone, it's new. And when something is new, that means they may not know exactly what to do the first time, but come the second or third or fourth or fifth time they have to deal with something, they've got it down. It's almost like when you're teaching a child how to write their name, which I'm surprised if they're even doing this anymore in schools, because they rely way too much on computers and it's so stupid. But, when a child is learning to write, at first their penmanship is horrible, right? But the more they do it, the more their penmanship improves, which is why, side note, I believe that all children should be taught how to read and write their name, and read and write the English language, in print and in cursive. It's very important, because now we have a bunch of kids, it's almost like they're illiterate without their phone or computer. It's crazy. Even the scribes in ancient Egypt knew how to read and write. How sad is that? And that was thousands of years ago. I think it's really unfortunate whenever we rely too much on technology and then we lose a skill. We lose an asset that is very important to developing the human brain. So, that's just my personal opinion. But anyway, I just wanted to circle back to a couple of things in regards to the EPA and why we still have some of these Superfund sites, and why, the majority of them were put on this list in the 80s. Because typically that's when a lot of these were identified, even though they were already there, and they may have already been identified in a previous federal agency. Mind you, they were split up. They were officially a hazardous site once the Superfund Act or law was created, and then they created the National Priorities List. So sometimes things take time, and then hopefully we can speed these things up, because I am disappointed that a lot of these are still on there and they're from the 80s. I would think that if we're going to have a lot of Superfund sites, it would be from stuff that's within the past 20 years or something. I would hope that we would have already cleaned up all of these from the past, but obviously we're still having some issues. So it's good to put a spotlight on it. Maybe this can help kind of move things along. Because again, it's not about shaming and blaming. It's about doing what's right. It's about helping people get back to their everyday life. And it's also about, cleaning up the environment. So that way we can leave it much better for, how do I word this? That way we can leave it in a better condition than when we received it. Than when you and I were living on this earth. Our children deserve better than what's going on right now. And I don't say that as an environmentalist. I just say that as an everyday concerned citizen. I think we can do better. And I think it starts on an individual basis, and then we can branch out or reach out to our community. And I don't mean like in a hashtag movement or going on strike or picketing. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just having a genuine care for something, having a genuine interest, not trying to shame and blame, not trying to get on the news and have like a YouTube channel or get on social media and be like a wealthy YouTuber or something, which nothing against people that are wealthy and have a YouTube channel. Go for it, that's great. But here's the thing. There's an appropriate way to handle this stuff and a very inappropriate way to handle this stuff. So I want to make sure that everything that we do on this show is always appropriate, always respectful, always kind, always genuine, because that means a lot to me. Very much a lot to me. Because I think more can be done when you're kind to people. That doesn't mean you look the other way. That doesn't mean you make excuses. It means that you're kind. Especially when you're having to deal with a touchy, sad situation. Because it very much saddens me that we still have these issues going on within our environment and within our country. Because I love my country. I love the United States. It's the most beautiful country on this planet. People move here for a reason. They leave other countries because they want what we have here. I would think that if people want to come here, then we need to make it a priority, even more so, to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep it good and clean and get it back to nature. I don't mean like do away with cement and bridges or something like that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about doing what we can to give nature a chance to grow and to bloom. And, it's very difficult for nature to do its thing if we've got all these toxic, hazardous areas all across the United States. That's very concerning to me. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started on this puppy. So the first one that is located in the state of Kentucky is called Airco. It is located in the county of Marshall. Let me see how many people live there. It says they have 31,659 people living there. I do not know what the reason is for this one or the date that it was added to the list. So we'll move on to the next one. The next one is B.F. Goodrich. Let me see if it gives me anything. It says the Goodrich Corporation, formerly the B.F. Goodrich Company, was an American manufacturing company based in Charlotte, North Carolina. It was founded in Akron, Ohio in 1870. Let's see here. I guess they have a site here in Kentucky. That's kind of concerning. So they are also located in the county of Marshall. The next one is Bowling Green Old Landfill. So obviously, being that it's a landfill, there's a reason why it has issues. This one is located in the county of Warren. Warren County has 134,554 people living in that area. The next active Superfund site in Kentucky is Brantley Landfill. Again, another landfill. That's why it's so toxic. And I just want to say this. I'm not against landfills. We need them. But there's an appropriate way to dispose of trash and garbage and a very inappropriate way. And I know just from living here in Oklahoma, people throw stuff just willy-nilly away when they shouldn't. Like they do not dispose of it they do not dispose of it properly. And the city does not really do its job. So that concerns me with that. Brantley Landfill is located in McLean County. And let's see, as of 2010, so this is outdated information, they had 9,551 people living there. I take that back. 9,531 people. Excuse me, I misread that. The next one is Caldwell Lace Leather Company, Inc. It is located in the county of Logan. Logan County, as of 2010, so this is old data, has 26,835 people living there. The next Superfund site located in the state of Kentucky. Sorry, my mouth is a little dry. Hold on just a second. Let me get a drink of water. It heated up the other day here in Oklahoma, and sometimes when it does that, it just kind of nukes the air a little bit. Okay, got some water. My apologies. Okay, so it is Disler Brickyard. That's interesting. And it is located in the county of Hardin. Hardin County has, let me see here, it does not tell me the population, so we will move on. The next one is Disler Farm. It is located in the county of Jefferson. It doesn't give me a population there, so let me go on to the next one. The next one is Fort Hartford Coal Company Stone Quarry. That's probably why it is a Superfund site, because they're dealing with coal. I'm not against coal, not by any means. We need that as a natural resource and as a type of energy because coal is good. But it really matters how they extract it from the ground or wherever they get it from. I don't know if they get coal from mines or the ground, whatever the case may be. I'm ignorant on that. But I think that we can always do a better job of whatever we are utilizing as a natural resource, because coal is a good resource and it is a type of fuel. What people tend to forget is that coal was used to have trains. So basically, like those old black and white movies from the 30s and 40s, whenever they have a scene where they're showing like the captain or the person that's in charge of the train, they're showing him shoveling coal into the steam engine, not steam engine, my apologies on that, into the furnace. I'm getting my technologies mixed up. They were shoveling coal into this furnace and they would heat it up, and that was giving the locomotive power, and they could go really fast. So coal is an actual really good natural resource that we can use as energy. You might want to think of it as something comparable to like gasoline or fuel, because technically it is a type of fuel. It is a natural resource and you can use it to give something energy. For example, if you're having a barbecue, what do you typically need to have a barbecue? You need coal. Well, coal is a great conductor of heat. So the reason why you're able to cook on your grill is because you have something there that heats up, holds the heat, can then naturally produce heat by being, lit with a match or something. And so then you're able to cook however much you want, and those coals stay hot a long time. So, if people are against coal, then I have to ask, then are you willing to give up all your barbecues? Are you willing to give up brick oven pizzas, things like that? Coal is not bad. It's how you utilize it that makes the difference. If you don't dispose of something properly, it doesn't matter whether it's coal or fuel or plastic. It's going to be the wrong way to dispose of something. So just dispose of something properly, then you can use it and it won't cause a problem. Now this Superfund site is located in the county of Ohio. In Ohio County, as of 2010, has 23,842 people living there. The next one is Green River Disposal, Inc. Obviously disposal, that tells me there's an issue right there. This one is located in the county of Davies, or Davies, I'm not sure I pronounced that. And their population as of 2010 was 96,656 people living there. And let me double check and make sure when this one was added to the list. Okay, double check something because I don't want to tell you wrong. Okay, so this one was added to the list August 30th, 1990. The next one located in the state of Kentucky is Maxey Flats Nuclear Disposal. So obviously a problem there because it's nuclear and they're disposing of something. So here's the thing. Nuclear power or anything to do with nuclear energy or anything to just do with anything nuclear. I'm just going to make it a broad statement, blanket statement, which I usually don't do, but I'm going to do it in this case. The word nuclear has been totally misused and has been demonized by crazy environmentalists. Nuclear energy and anything to do with that is such amazing technology. It is absolutely vital that we not throw that knowledge away. It's almost like, with our kids, if they're not being taught how to read and write their name, they're not being taught how to print their name and print their name in cursive, or write their name and print in cursive, you're losing a skill there. Okay? It's the same thing to deal with nuclear energy. Nuclear power plants are amazing tools to have. They provide so much energy at a fraction of the cost. Like whatever your electric bill is, let's say it's $300 a month, which is insane, but some people do have to pay that price. That's probably based off of electricity. If we had more nuclear power plants in the United States, your bill would maybe be $30 to $50 a month as opposed to $300. It is amazing technology. We just need to make sure that we know what we're doing and we know how to dispose of something once we're done using up anything that is nuclear energy. Because whatever you use it has waste associated with it, just like coal. So for example, if you have a barbecue and you've just lit up some coals, when you're done barbecuing and your coals are now cool, guess what? You probably have a lot of ash. Well, ash, you have to dispose of that properly, right? Hopefully most people do. It's the same thing with nuclear power plants. They know how to dispose of that properly. They do know. But in instances like Maxi Flats nuclear disposal, obviously something happened, and probably from back in the past. Oh, and I'm correct on that. So it says here, I'm looking it up, it says the Maxi Flats low-level radioactive waste disposal site is a Superfund site in Kentucky, which served as a disposal site for low-level nuclear waste from 1963 to 1977. Okay, so here's the thing. We were already aware of nuclear energy just based from World War II, when we developed the nuclear atomic bomb, right? Or we developed the atomic bomb, excuse me. So, here's the thing. It's like what I've said before. Whenever we are learning something new, mistakes are going to happen. This would be a perfect example of a mistake. Okay? But it's a disposal site. It's not even a nuclear power plant. It's a disposal site. But it goes back to 1963 to 1977. So just think about this. The atomic bomb was invented in the 40s, right? And that's one of the main reasons why we won World War II. So it's not that far out from 1945 when the war ended to 1963 to 1977, and then the EPA was created in the 70s under President Richard Nixon. So even though that may seem like a lot of years to you and me, in terms of technology, that's just a fraction. Because here's the thing, again, at one point everything is brand new and we're learning about something as we go along. So over time, we're learning how to dispose of stuff properly. And you might be thinking, well, nuclear is just all bad. No, it's not. It's actually very good. And I'll give an example. We have seen a lot of Superfund sites that were a problem and are a problem because of wood treatment plants. Wood treatment plants go back to the 1800s. That technology is not new, but how they do it is new. And how they dispose of stuff properly is new. So yes, there's a technology there, and it started in its infancy years ago, probably hundreds of years ago, right? In terms of wood treatment plants and things like that. But here's the thing. When you learn something new, it's just that, it's new. So you develop a process. You have policies and procedures that you develop over time. That's why a lot of these, especially these wood treatment plants, that's why they may have been started in the 30s or 40s, for example, but they may have been bought and sold to other people. But then they're like, wait a second, what's going on with the waste, the byproduct? So here's the thing. There were a lot of things that were done in the 30s that they identified in the 40s. Hey, we can't do that anymore. There's a problem. Well, guess what? There were things that were done in the 1940s that, now we're in the 1950s. Wait a second. We can't do that anymore. Let's make this process better. So it's almost, you have to look at it from a point of view of almost maybe every 5 to 10 years, they reevaluate things. And they're looking at hey, how can we make this better? But then fast forward to today, we have a very rapid rate of identifying issues these days. I think we can all agree on that. The technology that we have and the industries that we have, the current industries that we have, especially within the United States, they are very good and very experienced, very professional, very educated in identifying issues almost from the get-go. Because we have that technology. But back in the day, they may not have always had the technology that we have. In fact, they did not. Just think about, for example, the Internet. The Internet now can be accessed even when you're way out in the boonies working on a rig. Whereas, let's say, for example, the 1950s or 60s, we didn't have Internet. And let's say you're working out on an oil rig and there's an issue that happens, you have to report that in. You have to leave the site and go call somebody or go report something. Just think about how long it takes to report something during these time frames. Whereas today, everything is instant. So I think that we need to remember that just because something is instant and easy for us It was not instant and easy for these people back then. That's my point with this. Because whenever you have to go back in time and look at something, especially, if it's like 2 or 3 decades ago, there is so much technology that is invented within that time frame, and patents and things like that. Maybe as an additional podcast episode, we'll look at all the different inventions and patents over the years, because it's really fascinating. Because people think of new things all the time. So number 1, don't ever sell yourself short. Number 2, just remember, things can change in a second. So don't ever give up. And always try and look at things from a positive point of view, which is what I'm trying to do from this. Even though I don't like the fact that, things were not done to the best of one's ability, so to speak, in terms of this, the Maxi Flats low-level radioactive waste disposal site, big old long title. But I do know that 99%, they did the best that they could at the time, considering what they knew to be true at the time. The knowledge and the education and the technology that they had at the time. For example, if you want to really dive into that, what's really neat to do is to watch television shows that came out during that time frame. Like, for example, there is, Perry Mason's a really good show. It's from the 50s and 60s. And then there is Columbo. That one's really good. And then there's Rockford Files. What's another really good one? But shows that were current at that time, it's so cool because you get to see different cities and states, they're filming on site, just like, people are filming on site today. So you get to see, like, for example, how do I describe this? Like what New York City looked like back in the day in the 60s and 70s. You also get to see what Los Angeles looked like back in the day. But also, you get to see, like if they're investigating some kind of crime, you get to see what kind of technology they had, even for the police back then. How did the police, handle different cases, things like that? Because what you have to remember is that these shows I just mentioned and a whole bunch of other shows that I'm probably leaving out, they were doing a show and, showing America, hey, this is the current technology that we have and we're going to include this in our show. It wasn't like to promote technology. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the way they made their show realistic was they showed how things were actually done during that time, because that was their current daily life, if that makes sense. Oh, there's another one, Quincy M.E. That one's really good, if I didn't already mention that one. And that is Quincy Medical Examiner. Excellent show. There's only a couple episodes I did not like, but it was so cool to watch that show because, just from a medical point of view, you get to see what hospitals looked like back then, how nurses dressed, how doctors dressed, because these days you can't hardly tell who's a nurse and who's a doctor because everybody wears scrubs. And I think that's one reason why some nurses think they are the doctor. And I'm like, no, you're not. If you don't have MD after your name, it's very unlawful and unethical for you to act like a doctor. It's very concerning to me. But you also get to see, like, how did they deliver bad news to a patient or a family member? And then what did the ambulances look like back then? Excuse me. Sometimes I have an accent being here in Oklahoma. So when I do my podcast, I try and not have a twang, I guess, whatever the word is. Texas has more of a twang than Oklahoma, but sometimes we do have an accent that comes out. So I hope that just makes you chuckle, But anyway, and also another thing in regards to Quincy M.E., medical examiner, you really get to see that the medical examiner was used way more back then on site at car wrecks. Whereas today, they're not hardly used at all at on-site car wrecks. Because, another one, what's it called? Is it Rescue? Not Rescue 911. That's a good one as well. But there is, I just thought of it. Well, it's another show. It's similar to Chips. What am I thinking of? It's the one where these two guys are paramedics. And it's a really good show. And what's neat is that they're actually working in conjunction with firefighters. Because I think what we forget is that back in the day, we didn't have ambulances. And then also, there was a time frame when a doctor rode in the ambulance as well. I mean, I would love that if they would go back to that, where they actually had a doctor in the ambulance along with the paramedics. I think that would be amazing. See, because here's the thing. Way back in the day, back in the 60s and 70s, car wrecks back then were pretty bad. And not because of the cars or the drivers, but because when a car wreck happened, first of all, they didn't have cell phones, so they could not get a hold of someone quickly. And most of the time, they would send what I call a funeral parlor car to the site. Because if the police were there, the police would show up, and sometimes they would kind of have to say, hey, we're not sure if this person's going to make it. So most of the time, they sent like the funeral parlor car because there was nothing they could do at the actual site of these car wrecks way back in the day. So, for example, IMSA, we used to not have IMSA. We used to not have ambulances. Also, we used to not have IV bags that they would administer to you at the site of the accident. That's why you would typically have the medical examiner that would show up because they are a doctor. And then you would also have the funeral parlor people show up. Just because a lot of times the doctor or a ambulance could not get there in time to the site of the car wreck because, we didn't have cell phones, and you're having to rely on the police and the hospitals to be able to communicate with each other over radio or possibly telephone. And just think about that technology way back in the day, in the 60s and 70s. So I know that's kind of a long example, but for sure, go back and rewatch some of those shows or watch them if you've never watched them before, because you will see what life was like back then in America and how much technology and procedures and things like that have changed. If modern medicine has advanced as much as it has, then we have to acknowledge that the technology in regards to nuclear power has also advanced and changed and gotten better over the years. So that's one reason why I'm not a big fan of these extremist environmentalists, because they don't understand advancements in technology. That's what I was talking about, where I'm not a fan of these crazy liberals within these federal agencies, especially within the EPA, where instead of helping people, they just shame and blame. Like, all they do is focus on the problem. But if all you ever do is focus on the problem and you don't ever go towards a solution, then guess what? You will never correct the problem, and you will always continue to have the same issues, and you will never move forward. I mean, it's no different than when you go to therapy or something. Let's say you go see a therapist, and all you ever do is talk about, like, I'm going to use an example that it's not my life by any means, but let's say, for example, you're married and your spouse cheats on you. If all you ever do is complain about your spouse cheating on you, and I understand that's horrible, but here's the thing. Let's say you're divorced. Your spouse has moved on. They're dating or married somebody else, but yet you're still hurt and broken in your sadness. Okay, yes, I understand you're hurt and broken in your sadness, but at some point, you have to go, I'm moving on. You have to address what you can control and what you cannot control. You cannot control someone else's behavior, especially if they cheat on you. But what you can control is you can control your mind, your will, your emotions, and you can also control the fact that you have the ability to forgive them. To forgive them doesn't necessarily mean that you tolerate what they did or that you let them back into your life, because I think when someone cheats on you, me personally, that's grounds for divorce. Me personally, this is probably being really blunt, but I could never have sex with someone again that cheated on me. That just disgusts me. Because, in order to cheat on someone, you have to go through a lot of steps to do that. If you think about it, you have to meet somebody, flirt with them, take off your clothes, and then procreate, right? So, obviously, it wasn't just, oops, I did it again, like a Britney Spears song or something. There were a lot of character flaws and a lot of bad mistakes that led up to them cheating on you, right? So, needless to say, let's say, for example, you're still seeing a therapist because you haven't gotten over the hurt. Get over the hurt. Go out there and meet somebody else. See, it's the same thing in regards to situations like this, in regards to the EPA and these Superfund sites, because it's like, If all you ever do is only rely on federal agencies, you're in for a big surprise, because they are not the ones you should be completely relying on. Because especially, whenever the presidency changes from Republican to Democrat, Democrat to Republican, sometimes you get people in there that they want to shame and blame, which usually comes from the liberal left. And it's like, okay, if we were in therapy, would your therapist tell you, oh yeah, just stay on that rut, don't ever look towards the future, don't ever try and change anything? Would you continue to go to that therapist if they said that to you? No, you would not. Because the goal of your therapist is to get you back to where you were before the hurt, but stronger now after the hurt. That's my point. So even though we do have some serious issues in regards to Superfund environmental catastrophe sites in the United States, yes, they're bad, yes, they're not good, but we can't stay stuck in shaming and blaming and just picking apart different technologies, when actually what we need to do is help those technologies move forward. Because just think about in terms of like medical care. Let's say, for example, we never invented the MRI. Do you have any idea how many people get MRIs in the United States, much less the entire planet, and how amazing the MRI is at diagnosing people? See, that's the thing. If all we ever do is stay stuck in the past was tough, then we never have a brighter and better future. So always move forward is my point. But getting back to this Maxey Flats nuclear disposal site, or Superfund site, it's located in the county of Fleming. As of 2010, Fleming has 14,348 people living there. It was added to the National Priorities List June 10th, 1986. The next one that is current and active is the National Electric Coil Cooper Industries. It is located in the county of Harlan. Harlan County, it doesn't tell me the population, but it's in the southeastern part of Kentucky. It was added to the National Priorities List October 14th, 1992. The next one is Paducah Gaseous Diffusion Plant. That's interesting. Let me see if it tells me anything. Okay, it tells me it is a facility located in McCracken County, Kentucky. Oh, it produced enriched uranium from 1952 to 2013. It is owned by the U.S. Department of Energy. Okay, now I know why that's an issue. Okay, so again, there's an issue because of the uranium, but at the same time, uranium is actually a good thing, so don't knock it before you know everything about it. So McCracken County, let's see, there's 67,875 people living there, and I do have a little information on this Superfund site. The issue with this one is groundwater contaminated with VOCs. I've never heard this word, technetium-99 and uranium, thorium, plutonium, and neptunium. I'm not sure how to pronounce that word. My apologies if I mispronounced that. Let's see, those have been detected in off-site sediments and surface water. TCE and PCBs have been found on-site in the soil. This one was added to the list May 31st, 1994. The next one is Smith's Farm. It is located in Bullitt County. Bullitt County, it doesn't give me a population, but it's in the north central part of the state of Kentucky. It was added to the list June 10th, 1986. The last one that is a current Superfund site is Tri-City Disposal Company. It is also located in the county of Bullitt. And let's see, it was added to the list March 31st, 1989. Now we're going to go to the ones that have been deleted from the National Priorities List, and that means that they have been cleaned up and good to go. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. The first one is A.L. Taylor, Valley of the Drums. Let me see what it says about this. Oh, wow, it shows me a picture. That's really graphic. Okay. It says the Valley of the Drums is a 23-acre toxic waste site near Brooks in northern Bullitt County, Kentucky. If you look at the picture, it's really sad. But, excuse me, I just took a vitamin. This one was cleaned up and good to go as of May 17th, 1996. So that one we do not need to worry about anymore. The next one is General Tire and Rubber Mayfield landfill. Okay. That one was located in the county of Graves. Let's see here. It was cleaned up and good to go as of October 27th, 2000. The next one is Howe Valley Landfill. It was located in the county of Hardin. Let's see here. It was cleaned up and good to go as of July 26th, 1996. The next one is Lee's Lane Landfill. It was located in the county of Jefferson. Let's see. This one was cleaned up and good to go as of, that's going to be April 25th, 1996. The next one is National Southwire Aluminum Company. That one was located in the county of Hancock. And it was cleaned up and good to go as of October 5th, 2015. The next one is Newport Dump. It was located in the county of Campbell. It was cleaned up and good to go as of June 3rd, 1996. The next one is Red Pen Sanitation Company Landfill. It was located in Oldham County. Let's see here. It was cleaned up and good to go as of September 14th, 2001. Okay? So we are all good to go on Kentucky. So Kentucky still has some to clean up. But, I mean, again, their list is not super huge. And they've already been cleaning up some others. And also, I don't see any other sites that are being proposed to being added to the national priorities list. So it's good to see that, because in times past, I did not always list off the ones that were proposed to be added to the national priorities list on other ones, because some of them, it was a big old long list. I mean, it probably would have taken 2 or 3 hours on some of these podcasts in some of these other states that were proposed for addition to the national priorities list. So I wanted to wait and see if some of those sites, if they do in fact get added. Because sometimes I think what happens is they're proposed to be added to the national priorities list, but then if they're not really deemed as bad as what they think, you know, they research it and they say, okay, does this really qualify as a national priority? If it does, they add it to the list. If it does not, then they do not add it to the list. So that's why they have a proposed list, and then ones that are currently active, and ones that have been deleted and they're good to go, they're cleaned up. So sometimes I list the ones that are proposed, and sometimes I don't. If it's a big old long list of the ones they're thinking about adding, I don't really see the point in going through a big old long list of proposed sites, because that means they haven't made up their mind yet, yay or nay. So it's kind of like, I don't want to fuel the flame, so to speak. I would rather than be able to identify, okay, what do we need to do and what do we not need to do, kind of thing. But anyway, probably for the next podcast, we will probably either go over another labor union, and then, or we will go on to the state of Louisiana in terms of Superfund sites. So, but until next time, I pray that you're happy, healthy, and whole, that you have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.